GM, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. Thanks for tuning in to Bitcoin Builders. Every week we host different projects or talk about the Arch ecosystem or just the Bitcoin design and development space in general. Today we're going to be having a conversation and talking about Arch. We've got pinned up top the Arch 101, bringing fast composable apps to Bitcoin. And I'm going to start in a little bit of a interesting way. Maybe we'll have a bit of a philosophical discussion with the whole question of what exactly is art? What are we building? How does it defined? What category does it fit into? I posted yesterday the age-old question that I seem to get. You guys are that Bitcoin layer 2, aren't you? Or whatever people ask. So we'll start there. I'll throw it over to you, Nick. And if anybody wants to come up and join the conversation, we'll continue. But go ahead, Nick.
I just love that setup because essentially we just told you guys, hey, Arch 101, come out and find out what Arch is. And we actually just want to turn the tables and hear from you what you think Arch is. I think that's a good place for us to start. Because we'll answer some technical questions on this call. We'll, talk all about any sort of design stuff. But I'm curious to start just what, when you've heard about Arch in the past, what was the main takeaway you had? And then if you've told anyone about Arch, what have you told them that made them understand, oh, this is why, this is such a big opportunity. So I think a good person to actually start with here would be Dogfather, because Dogfather, I believe you had Matt on your X space earlier today. So tell me your takeaway from that conversation. If you had to describe Arch just from that conversation, how would you describe it and what makes you excited about it?
Hey, GM, yeah, thanks for having me. Today is an Arch day for me because I just had a 1 hour convo with Matt. And honestly, I knew a bit about Arch and what you guys are building. But Matt, if you don't feel FOMO after that, you have to listen to the recording. At the end, the most important thing in every ecosystem is you need to have at least one killer app. And when we asked Matt about it, and there are many cool dApps that are coming, but at the end, so he pointed out that if you have lightning fast, Solana-like trading experience, then that's definitely something you need. So he pointed me to, you have to dabble around more with Saturn, right? And then there are a couple of other things, but at the end, you need to find this one killer application, and then plenty of more, of course, to be like a pro eco, but you need this one killer app. If you have 10 mediocre things that are not better than everything else in the ecosystem, you're probably not going to make it. I want to see at least one killer app there, and then everything else follows.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You have to have that for adoption. Caleb, do you have any thoughts on that as head of our eco? You talk to killer apps all the time. I'd be curious what you think are some of the killer apps that people should be paying attention to. And also, when you talk about Arch for the uninitiated, for maybe the non-Bitcoin eco people, how do you describe it? What do you think are the main takeaways that people should be paying attention to?
So in terms of killer apps, if you just think what people do already with their Bitcoin, either with centralized services or through bridges, they swap between it and they take loans against it. So those are definitely the two low-hanging fruits, and we see several teams building out these functionalities on Arch already. One thing that's not really talked about that I think is quite interesting is that 55% of the stake volume that's with crypto is with Bitcoin. So this is the stake, the betting app. So actually, this idea that Bitcoin is gold, but it's actually only gold for some people. For a lot of people, it's still a risky asset that they're willing to bet on or gamble with. So I think that's another cool killer app potentially. There's definitely a lot of prerequisite knowledge that requires to kind of really understand any blockchain infrastructure. I like to simply explain it as we're a proof of stake network embedded in Bitcoin.
A good way to put it. I like that. Yeah, pretty simple if you're already somewhat crypto native. So it's good. Speaking to what you said about how you need a killer app, but also being able to just do the things that people want to be able to do on Bitcoin is by itself a super novel use case, because you tried to trade on Magic Eden, you try and trade Bitcoin assets anywhere, and it's this really bricky experience. You're not able to actually move your transactions more than once every 10 minutes. You're not able to do anything really complex or interesting with your assets, or if you do, it's this really convoluted process. You saw Ethereum was so quickly vastly adopted because you had Bitcoin, which was just relatively stable, but you couldn't really do much with it out of the money transfer. And suddenly you could do all these other things. You could do smart contracts, right? And that 0 to 1 upgrade and experience led to massive adoption, right? You look at Solana massive adoption coming from just so much faster than Ethereum and so much lower transaction costs, right? Again, the experience is such an improvement in experience that it unlocks new use cases. It leads to mass adoption. But Bitcoin's a little tricky because the experience you're going to get with Arch is amazing, because you're going to be able to actually have Bitcoin apps that have Solana-like speeds. And that's amazing. But it's not a 0 to 1 new experience from a UX standpoint compared to Solana. So Solana, as people are familiar with trading on Solana, it's relatively similar. So the interesting thing about Bitcoin, and what I'm trying to say, is that the mass adoption doesn't come from necessarily a 0 to 1 performance experience overall, although for Bitcoiners who have just been trading Bitcoin, you go, it absolutely will be that much better. It's going to have to come from the fact that Bitcoin itself is this asset that people have truly culturally, organically, and with their liquidity have shown that they want to use it. And now we'll finally be able to do things with it. But it's interesting because in this case, you don't have to necessarily create a new killer app. You don't have to create like what Pump.Fun was like this last cycle, something brand new on the scene. You almost have to just get all the bread and butter staples on the table, because people have been starving for a solution like this for so long and haven't had it.
I think like innovation is still super exciting to us. Like Bitcoin doesn't have the primitives. So those are billion-dollar opportunities that you can tackle. But crypto still has a long way to go. We're always looking for new and exciting things. And like Nick was saying, like Bitcoin was so slow, it has high fees, and other infrastructures tried to create a new kind of like canonical token. Look at Litecoin, look at XRP, and then eventually they just all settled on building like new chains, because Bitcoin didn't have its dominance back then. But now we're seeing that it's converging upwards, Bitcoin dominance, that is. So no chains have actually taken into consideration native Bitcoin support. And that's like the real core differentiator between Arch and these other L1s, is that we take Bitcoin into consideration at our core, embedded within Bitcoin.
And within that, I think there's two aspects. There's the community side of it, building developer community, and then along with that is tooling of developers. What are some ways that Arch is addressing maybe both of those when it comes to gathering an early community of developers within the ecosystem to be building and deploying on Arch, and ultimately tying and anchoring closely to Bitcoin as you're already speaking?
Caleb, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I know that you've been working a lot with developers on
Oh yeah, sorry, I was directing that to you, Caleb.
Yeah, I think developer tooling is obviously super important. You look at Ethereum ecosystem, they've had now a decade of just like organic support from either like bag holder, Ethereum community, Ethereum developers. You have a suite of like an open source culture almost on Ethereum, which fostered that experience. I think if you look to another good dev tooling suite, you look at the Move ecosystem, and that's because that was propped up by Facebook, obviously. But fortunately, because we are SVM compatible, we do benefit from a lot of the tools from the Solana ecosystem, which have exponentially accelerated over the past few years. And so we have a few exciting things coming out, like our own version of Anchor, for example. So now instead of having to write Rust, which is a bit more complex and low level, you can now write your contracts in TypeScript, a much higher level, easier language to write on. And then you don't have to worry about all these kind of like safety nets that you need to.
Yeah, that's gonna be crazy, bro. Like that's gonna be nuts, Kale. You've done some vibe coding in your time, so you know what it's like to do different levels of abstraction on the code. But being able to do that was a huge. People don't understand this, but that was a huge unlock for the Solana ecosystem when Anchor and these other things emerged that allowed a more accessible development. And it's not even that the best projects are going to need that level of help. It's more about when anyone's just interested, they want to have an easy environment to get started and play around before they go full on, right? Before they fully throw themselves into a new ecosystem. That's the challenge with any new ecosystem is how do you convince people to just get up and either learn a new programming language or learn new calls, learn new integration. That's tough. And from a marketing perspective or communication standpoint, like that's what we have to do is we have to make it as easy as possible for people to do that. So the fact that Arch is going to bring an Anchor style app development system to Bitcoin, that's just insane. So I'm super pumped about that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And also shout out to Korg. He's been doing a lot of open source development on the RPC side as well, which is great. And the Saturn team as well has developed a few other TypeScript SDKs to help with the Bitcoin orchestration. We're getting really close to a very TypeScript native, easy to use developer environment that doesn't require nearly as many years or months even of developer experience. And you can just start writing code on day one with a month or two of computer science knowledge.
Yeah, with that in mind, I want to bring more people up here. So raise your hands if you have anything you'd like to say, or if you want to go ahead and request to speak. We're going to prioritize people who we know has engaged with Arch or somewhat are builders in the Bitcoin ecosystem. If you have a great Orinoid PFP, we'll bring you up. I'm curious to hear more about what people think Arch is, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how we describe it. I did want to add that when I talk to the community on Bitcoin, one thing we talk about is we are a community in the traditional sense that we're all super excited about. And we're all like the original cypherpunks. So it feels like we're just out here grinding and trying to build something in a new land with the Bitcoin eco. But unlike these other ecos, like a new layer like Sui or Solana in the early days, there isn't like a grant incentive. There isn't like an ecosystem bedrock that allows us all to work together toward a common goal. It's like you're creating all these siloed apps on Bitcoin. And yeah, we all support each other, but these apps can't talk to each other on the base layer. They don't have a way to communicate or share liquidity. They don't have easy ways to integrate. And with all that in mind, I think that's one of the underrated aspects of Arch. This could be really exciting is that by adding this smart contract layer, this execution layer to Bitcoin, and being able to do it with native Bitcoin assets, suddenly you do have the opportunity for us to build a real community here. And we've seen that a lot with our Arch Vegas event, Arch House in Dubai. It's been really cool to see the Bitcoin community really rally around this and say, okay, now as builders, we can build apps that aren't just competing for attention, but actually building attention and building technology together. Girl in the verse, would love to hear what you think. You obviously been someone who was a real OG ordinal influencer, I'd say, talking about all these projects, and before that, Ethereum and NFTs and things like that. So you've been around a lot of different communities, and I also know that you visited the Sui community in Dubai, right? So tell me a little bit about what with the best community, and also I'd just be curious when you try and describe Arch to people, what you're describing it as.
Yeah, I'm always like, how much time do you have? Yeah, I think so. I actually had a question for all of you up on stage, but I will answer, Nick. Yeah, I think like what I've noticed through, like, let's say my 5-6 years in crypto is that if we don't, like, you're talking about builders, right, in community. I feel like if collectively we don't work together, then it shows. So that's what I appreciated about Ethereum. And I think, without always saying, oh, it was a flash in the past, we can't replicate what happened in 21. We probably can't. But I think what Ethereum and all the communities did well together was that they stayed true to that one chain. And obviously, I think like Bitcoiners and maxis really stay true to Bitcoin. But I think my biggest struggle right now when it comes to the Bitcoin community is that we're kind of mented because we've got the maxis who don't want to build. Well, they just want to stack their coin. And then we've got a lot of us here who want to build, we've got this great network here, Arch Network, who's literally inviting people to build cool things on Bitcoin and basically saying, come and build it with us. And so I feel like that's what I see. And then when it comes to like what I've learned to appreciate about that whole other side of community is that they're so young and they want it so bad. And they've got advocate. You know, you've got a Denny and you've got all these big, let's say, big leader. I've always said like the great thing about Ethereum, whether we love his dance moves or hate them, is Vitalik. We've got Vitalik going and be the preacher, right? Like, gee, and I feel we missed that with Bitcoin. Anyway, that's like my little, that's sort of what I've seen over the years. I would actually argue that the best team, they're not even a team, is the XRP community, because I don't know how they got all these people telling us off on all the apps.
Those people are so obsessed. Oh my
I
God.
know, like,
You know what though? You kind of appreciate it because you talk about building cults. And it's like I was like traveling to Australia last year. I met these Australians and we were just on a boat. And of course, immediately I started getting showed XRP. And there's like a certain demographic that is just like they sold everything for XRP and sat on it for like 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and now they're finally gaining. So kudos to them for getting some
exactly.
gains over all that time.
And I joke about it a
yeah,
lot. Like I joke
it's
about
crazy.
XRP a lot because it's to your point. You'd be somewhere in the middle of the ocean and you've just got this person that doesn't want to hear anything other than those 3 letters. Anyways, all this to say, Nick, I do think, you know, when it comes to Arch and what Arch has built, like I'm always trying, when I'm talking to people who are potentially interested, right? I'm always saying, what would you like to see happen on Bitcoin? Because I think for the longest time, even when ordinals came out and runes came out, like uh, everyone on the other chains were like, okay, what are they trying to, you know? So I feel like if you're a project who's sincerely and truly interested in seeing change happen on the mother chain, then it's worth you speaking to the guys at Arch Network because they are building something incredible. But not only the tech behind what you guys are building, I think what's been so nice to see when whether it was I was in Dubai or Vegas with you guys was seeing people wanting to build together. And I think that having these groups of people work together with Arch, but on Arch, I think that's like your secret sauce right now. And I'm just hoping that more people become aware, but also want to be a part of it. And I think that is going to be probably. So the one question I did want to ask you guys is, are you guys looking for more builders right now? And how can people get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to define builder in different ways here because I'm going to let Caleb answer the question about specific apps and developers. So more like the traditional builder. But I would say from a community standpoint, from an ownership standpoint, from people who want to be part of something that you're still early on, but you're getting in at a really good time, I gotta say, because you're not coming in when the tech isn't ready. When we're in security review, we're building this thing, like this thing is happening, right? And so if you want to take a pretty sure bet while still being early, I'd say it's a great time to get involved with the Arch community. And so from a building perspective, from people who want to take the lead, run with an idea, get like strategic support, get advice from us, get technical integrations, things like that. I think it's a fantastic time because listen, Bitcoin's pumping, breaking through walls that we never expected to see fall down anytime soon. And that is going to trickle down to this Bitcoin ecosystem that is really primed for a pump if the liquidity can actually flow, if you actually have these use. I've seen a lot of business leaders, people who are experienced building companies, leading teams, and also communicators and growth hackers do really well in integrating with our community. And also we have a bunch of projects that any good ecosystem has to have to support the rest of the projects, right? So infra, there's just general public goods projects. And we're looking for leaders, not just from the technical standpoint. In some ways, I think we have an embarrassment of riches in terms of developers. But sometimes we don't have as many people who have experience building businesses, building teams, and building growth engines, right? If there are people here who have done that and who have great experience and want to be matched with some great opportunities, I think that's a real great opportunity. And I'm speaking mostly from the marketing side and from those skills. But Caleb, to answer to answer Girl in the Verses question here, how would you describe our desire for more projects, builders, and things like that?
Listen, you can never have enough developers. We support our projects very closely, and we're always coming up with new ideas. and posting it to rfs.arch.network. So if you're interested in founding a project or you're a developer looking for work, check out rfs.arch.network. And yeah, my email is linked on that page as well. So hit me up there. But I think what I can say here is that our community hasn't even seen half of what's going to go live on mainnet. There's so many people cooking behind the scenes. We like 3 or 4 projects raised funds last quarter. Cs are interested in our ecosystem. A lot of talented Solana developers are as well, as we're the SVM stack. So I think it's a really good time to be building on us and getting in early, pre-mainnet, getting everything ready, because it's about to go crazy.
There's such a variety in the ecosystem too, from what's going on with like fungible tokens on Bitcoin, meme coins on Bitcoin, to some of the building with more like real world asset type stuff. I saw Arcova's down in the space, what they're doing, which is totally unique and leveraging Arch and putting data on Bitcoin. We've got VoltFi up here as well. I'm sure you guys want to jump in the conversation, but I was going to go to Dogfather real quick since you got your hand up if you want to ask a question or jump in on this topic.
Yeah, you said VoltFi. That's exactly my question. Ideally, you ask the projects, right? So how do you feel about integrating with Arch, building on Arch? How are you looking forward to the mainnet launch in a month or so? That's the real question. Let the project speak.
This is Guy from VoltFi. First and foremost, all of you should watch the Dogfather and Matt podcast that happened earlier today off Alpha. Great conversation. From the builder's perspective, I can clearly say what we like and love about Arch. It's a clear focus on the ecosystem creation, because we know from the builder's perspective and from the ecosystem creation that in the Arch case, it's not plus or minus. A builder minus that builder, this project or that, but it's a multiplication, because the more projects that build on Arch, even if they compete between themselves, it's better because we create higher network effects. We bring more liquidity, more users, and that really excites us. I see a lot of people also talking about that there is a need for Bitcoin consensus on DeFi, on the programmability, what's going to happen. But if we draw parallels from Ethereum DeFi and solutions that happened like 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we go back to the first few months of the pandemic, imagine March 2020, us here talking about the potential of Arch Network creating this programmability layer with smart contracts that will allow all this, in our case, VoltFi, the holy grail of Bitcoin yield creation. So it's an amazing time, and we love the team, love the community, feel welcome, and are really happy to be here.
Guy, would you mind real quick just giving us like the minute TLDR of what is VoltFi, just for anybody who may have not heard of what you guys are building and what you're bringing to market here?
Yes, Fi is building a Bitcoin native derivative trading platform where users can leverage the volatility of Bitcoin and generate yield on Bitcoin. What's volatility? Volatility is the speed by which the price of Bitcoin changes. And for a lot of users, that's a huge pain point. But for real investors and traders, that's a huge alpha. And we want to bring that to Bitcoin holders natively on Arch, plus many other ideas that we built on top of that. We're live on testnet. You guys should go to votefi.xyz, try our testnet, send us feedback, and we're here for ideas and suggestions.
Feel free to pin something up, or I might find one of your later posts and pin it up top as well. We've also got Sterling here if you want to unmute. I saw you had trouble connecting there for a second, but it sounds like we can hear you, so you can go ahead.
Then I got disconnected because of bad service. I didn't want to take up too much time, but you guys asked for people building on Arch and why we're doing it. And co-founder of Arkova, ARKOVA. We are going to be launching on Arch probably towards the end of this year. But one reason, and I guess quick elevator pitch, Arkova is saving enterprises time and money throughout the audit preparation process by embedding specific metadata onto Bitcoin in the form of crypto caches. So we're not storing an entire document or storing cryptographic hashes to link back to give like great version control and audit history. But the reason we are using Arch is because when my co-founder and I, Nessie, were sitting down and looking over things, we needed a potential programmability layer that would allow us to do some more complex features.
Let's hear. I guess there are a lot of ways to describe what Arch is, right? Some of it's described as parallel execution for Bitcoin. Some of it's described as fastest and best Bitcoin VM that one could put together. The ecosystem of apps for Bitcoin, whatever you want to describe it as. I like to describe it as what it's going to be able to make possible for people, right? So thinking more about what does this actually do for you, right? And I think what it does for all of us who care about Bitcoin is it creates the first real native Bitcoin economy that actually allows it to become possible, right? So unlocking actual DeFi on the blockchain that is by far the most well-known, most liquid, and most valuable blockchain in existence. And having the ability to do that with Bitcoin native apps, as opposed to all these abstracted versions, these L2, I think that is going to be the real unlock here, and tapping into that is what I'm really excited about is seeing that evolve. So you can dig into our architecture there. Our docs are all over our website, our network, but I think it's just revitalizing that economy that's going to be really interesting from a base level. And Guy, I guess if you had to describe it, obviously you talked a little bit about BullFi and why it makes sense from a technical standpoint. Like if you're just trying to help someone understand why or what Arch is, how would you describe it?
I'm really lucky to have huge and capable co-founder who is like 110% fluid on Rust, which helps a lot build with Arch. I see Arch as a way for you to reach your dreams on Bitcoin without having to give up custody, without the security of Bitcoin. And that leaves everyone's idea of what's that dream a possibility. You can talk like Matt was talking earlier today about social fi, gamify. There are so many opportunities that few people are short-sighted. I think humans are short-sighted, but if we look 3 to 5 years from now, all of us here, projects, builders, and Arch are on testnet. Let's look for the future, day after day, building towards something concrete that works. With today's a 2.3 trillion market. Let's imagine it's a $5-10 trillion market in a couple years. Very few short years. The potential is huge. So there are so many fronts, and we need a lot of people to fill those fronts and help create this ecosystem that will get us there. Just a general perspective.
Yeah, love it. Brian, I don't know. You were someone actually, it was really great when I first came on as CMO at Arch. Brian was already manning our socials, leading our community engagement, as he continues to do with community partnerships. And Brian already had been in the Ordinal space for a while, big piece of Ninja guy. And I think that's, in some ways, your story is quintessential of the Bitcoin eco. And so I'm curious, I mean, you've been involved in ours like since day one, but I guess from just like someone who enjoys Ordinals and enjoys this community, what are the things that are interesting for you to continue to learn and find out? Because I know it's been a learning process too, where you and I sometimes are on, oh shit, like we actually do that too. I think that's the really fun part about all this is we ourselves are continuing to discover new things about the product.
Some of the aspects that I find more interesting do lie on those sides of creativity, especially in terms of creating new experiences around the crypto aspects that we've brought back to Bitcoin ever since the launch of ordinals. So from early 2023, it was like this huge resurgence of newfound creativity back on Bitcoin. And I think that depending on how your experience went in that early community, you really to see some of those like really great aspects, like some of the early teams that were building the tech to go along with it, and some of those essentially they were early startups. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much overlap there is into the VC and building in the layer two world versus those early ordinals days, because there's plenty of teams that are looking into all of the different DeFi things that are happening on Bitcoin. But I think at the end of the day, the big unlock that happens, and one thing that I think Arch is positioned in particular for, is on the user experience side of things, how it's able to give developers the ability to create whatever user experience they're going to want to create ultimately. One good example is that everyone has grown used to ever since we got to a certain stage in the ordinals craze, which we know was shortly followed by, you had BRC20 and then the launch of runes. So it's very quickly became this question of, okay, can we have this whole ecosystem here of non-fungible tokens plus fungible tokens? And it was high controversy. You'll remember that Casey essentially was regretting doing this whole new development because he just wanted it to be putting art on chain and doing art projects in a more Bitcoin native way. Ironically, we're talking about doing the same thing, doing DeFi in a more Bitcoin native way. I think that at the end of the day, the creation of on the user experience side of things is going to be like where the sure bets lie, in my opinion. And the best example that I can give is how we just grew so used to the ability to connect our Bitcoin wallet and do whatever was built for it, like trade, swap your ordinals for Bitcoin, buy ordinals. Borrow and lend came quickly, we know, with Liquidium figuring out how to do some of those really early things using the existing tech and tooling around Bitcoin itself, and the advancements that were made even in that first year around ordinals. And Arch is picking up where all of that left off in terms of dating back to then, in term with the co-founding team with Matt and Amin, and relationships around that existing ecosystem of builders, and the whole concept of still being able to connect your Bitcoin wallet, trade Bitcoin based assets, and interacting with Bitcoin and in a pristine way, I think is that killer app that you're looking at or that you're looking for. And it really is just like an ecosystem built on that philosophy, and then getting to the user experience that you want to. Yeah, I think exciting time.
I think people forget that the killer app of being able to use pristine Bitcoin to get actual sustainable Bitcoin yield, as opposed to all these other fugazi methods that we see out there, is in itself a killer opportunity. The ability, as I call it, to get Bitcoin savings accounts, something so traditional and easy to do in TradFi, yet something that hasn't existed on Bitcoin, a basic way to get an interest rate, right? That is going to be huge for a lot of people. And things like Arch can unlock that in a native way that just hasn't existed before. So I think this is probably a good time for us to give some quick just breakdowns of the Arch tech and some of the cool stuff about it. We did promise Arch 101. On a base layer, we talked about this earlier. What is Arch? We talk about it, and essentially it's a native solution for fast composable Bitcoin DeFi apps, right? Bitcoin apps that are native and able to use the Arch execution engine, all the mechanisms behind it, to create real smart contracts, the type that you'd like see on a Solana or Ethereum, right? And there are so many interesting technical things that go on to making that possible back. And I think what's been really cool about Amin and Matt's vision from the get-go was to have something that gave Bitcoin users what they actually wanted, which is the ability to do all this straight from their Bitcoin wallet, to not have to download or create some new thing, to not have to have some A, BTC, B, BTC, whatever, to actually transact with real native Bitcoin assets. But it's been a really interesting mechanism to see it happen. And if you want to look at it as like a parallel chain that is taking those transactions and processing them at fast speeds, there's some things that come up there. The biggest one being if you're going to tie an execution environment to the base layer and what's happening on Bitcoin, you have to have them communicating to each other constantly. You have to have them be able to make sure that whatever's happening within our execution environment is still accurately reflecting what's happening on Bitcoin, right? The one thing that the Saturn team helped us build is the Titan indexer, which allows you to actually read on the mempool level what's happening on Bitcoin and in those blocks. And if any blocks get canceled, you can transmit that message and let what's happening in the Arch execution engine know, hey, this got RB after, got this transaction got canceled. And so what you're seeing with Arch and with Bitcoin is this really beautiful, technical, difficult dance between the Bitcoin main layer and this execution engine that is able to constantly communicate with that layer and make sure that these faster transactions that are going through still are reflected accurately on the base layer. That was some challenges and technical hurdles that we had to overcome. It's creating things like the time indexer, was creating rollback mechanisms on Arch so that if a Bitcoin does have any discrepancy, we make sure that it gets completely reflected on Arch. And that whole dance of technical components is what really makes Arch unique, because we've seen Bitcoin L2's launch come and go. And I think the audience has spoken and they're just not thrilled with those opportunities. If you want to learn more about some of these things like the Titan indexer, the rollback mechanisms we instituted, the way that we create this Solana-like engine execution environment that also can speak UTXO, can speak the native language of Bitcoin, all that is on our blog, blog.arch.network. You can read some of those pieces as well, depends on how nerdy you want to get. But at the end of the day, it's been a really fun ride seeing this product come together and implement all these really interesting technical solutions. It really feels like the early days of Bitcoin itself, when you had all these just giga-chad geniuses coming together, bouncing around ideas, debating each other, grappling with the right solution, and ultimately coming up with something that now, geez, pretty much the whole world knows about and is worth trillions of dollars. That's kind of my short breakdown of what Arch is. How did I do, Brian? Did I miss anything?
I don't think you missed that.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that you're touching on there that are different aspects of what Arch offers. The first is the maintaining state with Arch versus state with Bitcoin, and the aspects of the architecture that go along with that, like you're talking about the rollback mechanism, and transactions that are in the last Bitcoin block, but you're just going faster, and there's implications that come along with that when you're trying to trade faster than Bitcoin and solve the 10-minute block time issue when it comes to trading on DeFi. So I think that's certainly interesting, and we get to having the user experience that everyone talks about is like the Solana-like speed and being able to trade things with that more instant finality and more quickly, to the point where you click the button and the asset is moving with your clicking, is like what we want to get to. So there's that aspect, but then also the ability to store data immutably on Bitcoin and leverage Arch to do that, which I think is distinctly different and maybe gets more into the side of creativity or different ideas and concepts that are already being built or being looked into within the ecosystem. So I wonder if this is something that Caleb could speak to a little bit more, but just by way of example and then speculating into the question a little bit, Arkova is doing what they're doing with using cryptographic hashes to store essentially the data or the product of the auditing process for corporations, existing businesses, so that they can have that in terms of provenance. So they're leveraging Arch as a way to leverage the provenance that Bitcoin offers. But they're not going so far as to inscribe all of the data as ordinals, which has a higher cost that's associated with it. I wonder what other sort of creative avenues people are going down in terms of leveraging Arch to store data on Bitcoin. This could be in all kinds of different areas. And this is what I think that some of the builders who are in the ordinals community might be interested in. What's the answer to this question?
Let's not forget that inscriptions themselves are
Ryan, you
storing
still there?
data
Right.
on Bitcoin.
To Brian's point, I'm super bullish on the way
Maybe
the
Nick
pups
can't hear any of us.
No? I don't know. I'll send him a DM, but you can go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, let's not forget that inscriptions, the novelty of them is that you can store data on Bitcoin, and through ordinal theory can then track where that data is posted, which unlocks this cool new renaissance, right? Like I read an interesting thread posted the other day about kind of the history of tradable assets on crypto. And for those of you who don't know, USDT, Tether's USDT was initially posted on Bitcoin. That's where it was first deployed as a colored coin, which kind of works similar to how ERC20s and runes work, but it was pre-Taproot upgrade. So you had 80 byte data size limits instead of now the 4 megabyte limit that we have now. It required separate wallets than just your regular Bitcoin wallet. So you could like send Tether to an address that you thought was your buddy's, but he doesn't have the right wallet, so it just gets burned. Basically, like the user experience sucked. And it still isn't great, but we have really cool applications now. We have a whole ecosystem that's thriving around this. But the other thing that Tether didn't have at that time on Bitcoin was programmability, right? And that's why it ended up moving over to Ethereum and eventually Tron, was to benefit from all of the DeFi over there, whether it just be swapping between assets or taking out loans. That's like the core functionality of stablecoins nowadays. It's a somewhat centralized art where you're trusting the indexer of the application to execute the transaction properly, and that all these applications agree on using the same indexer. Okay, fine. That's maybe good for a momentary swap, but I don't know how comfortable I would feel keeping my like Bitcoin in a meta protocol as collateral for years. That seems risky. And that's where Arch comes in. So not only do we extend Bitcoin, but we extend all these UTXO assets and unlock programmability for them. Saturn's a really good example of this. Atara as well, lending protocol. There's a lot of cool things you can do now a lot more easily on Bitcoin with these meta protocols, these UTXO assets. And instead of having to prop up your own centralized infrastructure, you can use Arch as like a decentralized cloud. And the cloud moment for Web 2 was huge. What's it going to be like for Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. And in that mode, you're dancing between the two. I have to imagine that as people dig into it a little bit more creatively, leveraging the ability to store data separately and call it perhaps at will in terms of different places around layer one ordinals, how that could apply in terms of development between Arch and layer one ordinals or runes or whatever style of development. Because at the end of the day, this whole aspect of which token standard you're choosing becomes a piece of the puzzle when you're looking more broadly at ecosystem level app development, even like just app development in general. That's one thing that I feel like differentiates Arch so much from other projects that people speak about, is that it's not even necessarily a singular project. You're talking about development of infrastructure for an ecosystem of projects. The question that you're answering is always a little bit separate from the way that you're going to answer it, because it involves a different level of creativity and connecting the dots of what is the end product going to be and how can we offer it in this new way. But I think that we lost Nick and he's having trouble connecting again. But we've been going for about an hour now. Generally, we go for an hour or so on the Bitcoin builders, sometimes up to an hour and a half. Seems like we've covered this topic pretty thoroughly. Dogfather and Melina, you're still up here, and Guy, you're still up here. So if you have some final things that you want to wrap up with here, then we can make our way around who's on stage or any last minute requests.
Go ahead, Dogfather.
Yeah, I can only recommend play around with these great tools, play around with these great services and ways like WorldFi, Saturn. You never know. I mean, sometimes in Web3 you have a nice airdrop or some big advantage of doing so. So a bit of clicking, a bit of reading the docs can make a big difference. I like to dabble around with new tech. You should do support the builders, and you never know, right? Sometimes it's paying off nice. You guys are launching the mainnet when I'm on vacation, so let's see. My fingers are crossed that this is playing out nicely. So keep crushing it.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate you. Melina, any last thoughts from you?
I don't have last thoughts, but I was just going to say we're probably going to be back here doing this next week. And then I guess, I'm always about the call to action. If you guys are interested, feel free to reach out to the Arch team, reach out to Brian or even myself, and Caleb. Maybe not Caleb, he's busy. Reach out to us and we'll see if you're a good fit. That's going to be another one of my questions. Can anyone build on Arch, or do you obviously you guys are like proofreading projects and seeing if it fits you guys. But I do want to encourage people who are maybe interested to apply and become a builder on Arch.
Yeah, ultimately anyone can build on Arch. When it comes to obviously like bandwidth and working directly with our team, then we have to always be aware of our time. And I think that goes without being said. But in terms of getting support within the ecosystem or asking questions of people that can give you like really valuable answers or even examples, built products before, and you're looking to ask questions about your idea and see whether it's possible. There's a lot of people that are within our ecosystem that you can speak to. So definitely reach out to myself, Caleb, Nick, and let us know like what your thoughts are, what you're thinking of doing, any questions you might have, and we can funnel you to the correct place, whether it's speaking with someone on the team or connecting you with someone in the ecosystem. Sterling was up here earlier. He comes to mind as somebody who's had a lot of conversations with different projects within the ecosystem, whether it's just like getting feedback or looking to solve issues or problems in their development. Hex is another guy that comes to mind, Hex from the Saturn team, and as being like really helpful in connecting certain people that might be able to answer questions that you might have in your development, whatever you're looking to build. But those aren't the only two. There's a lot of people who are really familiar with our tech at this stage and willing to help and answer questions. So just reach out to us and we'll get you connected and on the right path to building whatever it is you want to build. But yeah, there will come a day where it'll all be open and permissionless and anybody will be able to ship and deploy their whatever their apps are that they want to build and deploy them on Arch. So yeah, exciting times are coming and we're in our sort of final preparations for mainnet as we've been hinting around here.
Our docs are at arch.network. The programming guide is book.arch.network, and our testnet is open. Anyone can hop on and build whatever they'd like. And we have a good ecosystem of builders already building. So if you ever get stuck, I know the tech is a bit tricky right now. Always ask questions in Discord, Telegram. Yeah, and again, feel free to reach out to me or anyone else on the team.
For sure. I think that we'll probably go ahead and call it. It is about 2:35, so we're just past an hour here, and we will be back next week, Melina. Don't worry. We'll be every Tuesday here at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, Bitcoin Builders. I'm not sure if we've finalized what the topic is for next week, so no announcement for that, but we'll be talking to a lot of different projects, either around our ecosystem or building in the space in general, interesting topics in Bitcoin DeFi. Today's topic was Arch 101. What's Arch? What are we building? How do you define it? And we have plenty of alpha coming. So stay tuned to our main account and especially the reposts that you might notice, whether it's people that are already building and deploying or people that are connected to us. If you're one of those early alpha people, make sure that you stay tuned to all of our channels. Down in the replies, I put our documentation. It's docs.arch.network. That's the best place to go to look into the tech itself. From there, you can get to our white paper, you can get to the Arch book and start onboarding. And like we were saying, just reach out to one of us if you've got questions or want to start getting connected otherwise. But that's about all I got for you. We'll play our outro here and see you in about a week.
Real estate developers in New York City, they're not buying the real estate because they want to live in it.
But like most of the people who are buying assets at some point want to sell the assets at a profit.
That use currency as a store of value. We call them poor. That use fiat